They sat me by the kitchen doors, hidden behind a large faux marble pillar draped in wilting ivy. Apparently, my presence, specifically my navy blue homemade dress and sensible, low-heeled shoes, was ruining the wedding aesthetic. My own son's wedding. The words, delivered by the impossibly chic wedding planner but clearly originating from my new daughter-in-law, Tiffany, were meant to be whispered, discreet. But in the echoing acoustics of the ridiculously expensive reception hall, a hall I'd helped pay for, they landed like blows. Ruining the aesthetic. Me. The woman who had poured every spare cent, every ounce of energy, every waking thought for the past 30 years into raising the groom, into making sure he had everything he needed, everything she apparently now needed. I felt a flush creep up my neck, hot and prickling, a familiar wave of shame and anger that I quickly tried to swallow down. This was supposed to be a happy day. Mark's happy day. I plastered a smile on my face, the kind that doesn't reach your eyes, the kind I'd perfected over years of biting my tongue and putting others first. Before you judge the path I eventually took, before you call me bitter or vengeful, I need you to understand what it felt like, sitting there behind that pillar, smelling the clatter and grease from the swinging kitchen doors instead of the expensive floral centerpieces. I need you to understand the weight of years settling in that one, crushing moment. Tell me, where are you listening from today? And have you ever felt invisible in a place where you should have been cherished? Please subscribe if you want to hear how the story unfolds, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. It helps, truly, knowing others understand. The planner, all sharp angles and insincere smiles, had patted my arm condescendingly. It's just, you know, the look Tiffany's going for is very specific. Very curated. Your spot here is lovely, really. Almost a VIP view of the kitchen. She'd laughed, a brittle sound. I didn't laugh back. I just nodded, my throat too tight to form words. Mark hadn't even noticed. He was too busy gazing at Tiffany, resplendent in a gown that cost more than my car, her laughter tinkling like expensive crystal. He hadn't looked my way when I arrived, hadn't sought me out. When I'd tried to catch his eye earlier, during the ceremony, a ceremony held in a sun-drenched garden I'd weeded myself countless times when it was just part of the sprawling family home I'd eventually had to sell to fund Mark's ventures, he'd glanced past me, his focus entirely on his bride. Now, sequestered near the service entrance, I watched them glide through their first dance. Every twirl, every dip felt like another shovelful of earth being tossed onto the coffin of the relationship I thought I had with my son. It wasn't just the dress, was it? My dress was modest, yes. Made by my own hands because the budget Tiffany had presented for the mother of the groom ensemble was laughable, obscene even, considering I was still paying off the loan I'd taken out for their deposit on this very venue. The shoes were comfortable because my feet swell after years of standing, first waitressing to support Mark after his father passed, then later, pacing floors worrying about his choices. It wasn't just the clothes. It was me. My existence, my quiet life, my visible history of sacrifice didn't fit their glossy, Instagram-filtered narrative. I was a reminder of a past they wanted to erase, a past where things weren't always handed to them on a silver platter I'd helped provide. The bitterness I'd tried to swallow earlier rose again, sharp and acidic. I took a sip of water, the condensation dripping onto my navy dress. It left a dark spot, like a tear. Fitting. Looking back, the signs were always there, weren't they? Little erosions of respect, tiny dismissals that accumulated over time. It started subtly after Mark met Tiffany. He'd always been a good son, maybe a little thoughtless sometimes, like many young men, but fundamentally kind. Or so I'd believed. Tiffany, however, radiated a sense of entitlement I'd never encountered before. She came from money, or at least, acted like she did, treating Mark's modest background, and by extension me, as something quaint but slightly embarrassing, like a dusty heirloom to be kept in the attic. My home, the small condo I'd downsized to after selling the family house, the proceeds of which largely went to Mark's failed startup, was suddenly cozy in a tone that meant cramped and old-fashioned. My cooking, once his favorite, was now a bit heavy. My advice, solicited or not, was met with polite, vacant smiles and promptly ignored. The financial requests started small. Help with a car repair. Covering a bill just until payday. Then they escalated. The down payment on their trendy apartment in the city, an apartment far beyond Mark's salary. The engagement ring, Tiffany had very specific ideas about cut and clarity, none of them budget-friendly. And then, the wedding. Oh, the wedding. It ballooned from a modest affair they initially discussed into a multi-day extravaganza that seemed designed solely to impress Tiffany's wealthy friends and Instagram followers. Every time Mark called, my stomach would clench. It was never just to chat anymore. There was always an ask attached, wrapped in vague promises of paying me back when things settled down. Things never seemed to settle down. I dipped into my savings, the nest egg I'd painstakingly built after my husband, Frank, died suddenly years ago. Frank had been careful, practical. He'd left me enough to be comfortable, not rich, but secure. Or so I thought. That security was dwindling fast. Each withdrawal felt like betraying his memory, his careful planning. But it was for Mark, I told myself. My only child. I wanted him to be happy. I wanted Tiffany to, well, I suppose I just wanted her to accept me, to see me as family, not just an open wallet. I funded the deposits, paid for the dress-fitting alterations, hers, not mine, contributed significantly to the caterer, the band, the ridiculous dove release she insisted upon. I did it all with a smile, burying the resentment, telling myself it was the price of staying involved in his life. That wedding wasn't just a celebration of their union, it was built on the foundation of my diminishing future. And my reward? A seat by the garbage bins, hidden away like a dirty secret because I didn't match the decor. The irony was so thick, so suffocating, I could barely breathe around it. The days following the wedding were shrouded in a heavy silence. Mark and Tiffany jetted off on a lavish honeymoon to the Maldives, paid for, I suspected, partly by my final wedding contribution and partly by Tiffany's parents, who seemed to operate on a similar transactional basis but with much larger sums. I didn't get a postcard. I didn't get a call upon their return. Weeks bled into a month. The vibrant wedding photos flooded social media, curated, perfect shots where I was conspicuously absent. It was as if I hadn't been there at all. In a way, I hadn't. Not the real me. Just a ghost lurking near the service exit. I tried calling Mark once, my voice hesitant. He answered, sounding distracted, background noise suggesting he was out somewhere noisy and fun. Mom? Hey, everything okay? His tone was casual, too casual. Just calling to see how the honeymoon was, I managed. Oh, yeah, amazing, Mom. Unbelievable. Hey, listen, gotta run, Tiff signaling me. We're meeting friends. Love you. Click. Love you. The words, once a bomb, now felt like pebbles tossed into a well, hollow echoes without depth. He didn't ask how I was. He didn't mention the wedding seating incident. He didn't apologize or explain. It was simply ignored, erased from the official narrative, just like I had been. The isolation felt profound. My friends, bless them, tried to cheer me up, but they didn't fully understand the depth of the wound. Oh, weddings are stressful, they'd say. Young people can be thoughtless. But this felt different. This felt intentional. It felt like a calculated dismissal, a final severing of relevance. I stopped trying to reach out. What was the point? Each unanswered call, each brief, superficial conversation just twisted the knife further. I spent hours staring out of my condo window, watching life go on, feeling utterly disconnected. The vibrant energy I used to pour into Mark, into his life, had nowhere to go. It curdled inside me, turning into a dull ache of despair. Was this it? Had I sacrificed my financial security, my peace of mind, only to be deemed aesthetically displeasing and discarded? The shame I felt at the wedding morphed into a slow-burning anger, but beneath it was a chilling emptiness. I felt used up, invisible, like an old appliance unplugged and left in the basement. The future stretched before me, bleak and lonely. The savings account, once a source of comfort, was now a source of anxiety, significantly depleted. My sensible shoes sat by the door, a constant reminder of why I wasn't good enough. I started to truly believe it. Maybe I was just an embarrassment. Maybe I didn't fit into his shiny new life. The thought was a poison, seeping into my bones, making me feel old, tired, and utterly worthless. The turning point arrived unexpectedly, not with a bang, but with the musty scent of old paper and forgotten memories. It was a rainy Tuesday, several months after the wedding debacle. The silence from Mark and Tiffany had become the new normal, punctuated only by the occasional generic holiday text message. Feeling restless and needing a distraction from the oppressive quiet of my condo, I decided to finally tackle the boxes stacked in my small spare room, remnants from the move after selling the family house, things I hadn't had the heart or energy to sort through properly before. Most of it was clutter, old photo albums I lingered over with a bittersweet pang, outdated household items, clothes Frank had worn. Then, tucked at the bottom of a heavy box labeled Financials, Keep Safe, beneath old tax returns and appliance manuals, I found a large, sealed manila envelope I didn't recognize. It wasn't part of the official estate documents my lawyer had handled after Frank passed. This felt different, more personal. Frank's familiar, neat handwriting was on the front, for Martha, to be opened only by you, and only if you truly need it, or feel uncertain about the future. My breath caught. Uncertain about the future? That was the understatement of the century. My hands trembled slightly as I slit the envelope open. Inside wasn't just one document, but several, meticulously organized. There was a letter, addressed to me. "My dearest Martha," it began, and tears immediately sprang to my eyes, blurring his words. I blinked them back, forcing myself to focus. Frank wrote about his love for me, his pride in Mark, but also, his worries. He'd seen, even then, a streak of recklessness in our son, a tendency towards easy gratification that concerned him. He worried about me being left vulnerable. "I've made separate arrangements, my love," he wrote. "Something just for you. A safety net, independent of everything else. Our son is young, he'll make his own way, perhaps with some bumps, but you, Martha, you deserve peace and security above all. Don't let anyone pressure you or make you feel guilty for using what is rightfully yours." Beneath the letter were legal documents, official-looking papers detailing the establishment of a trust fund. Not the main estate trust, but a completely separate one, funded years ago with a significant portion of Frank's own inheritance from his parents, money I never even knew existed. It was managed by a quiet, independent firm Frank had trusted implicitly, with strict instructions. The principal was untouchable by anyone but me, and the interest income was to be reinvested unless I specifically requested distribution. There was also a clause, highlighted by Frank, stating that knowledge of this trust was to be kept confidential, even from Mark, unless I chose to disclose it or upon my passing. But then, tucked behind the trust charter, was a thinner envelope. Inside were copies of correspondence between the trust management firm and Mark. Dated just weeks after Frank's funeral. Mark had somehow found out about the trust, perhaps snooping through Frank's desk, and had contacted the firm, trying to gain access or at least information. The firm's polite but firm refusal letters were clipped neatly behind his increasingly demanding inquiries. He knew. He had known about this substantial safety net, my safety net, all these years. All the times he'd come to me, pleading poverty, asking for help, leveraging my love and guilt, he knew there was a resource he simply couldn't touch, one his father had deliberately ring-fenced for me. The room started to spin. The implications crashed down on me. His requests for money weren't just about need, they were about draining my accessible funds, perhaps hoping I'd become desperate enough to break into the trust, or maybe just bleeding me dry out of spite or greed because he couldn't get to the bigger prize. The wedding, the extravagance, Tiffany's demands, it all clicked into place with sickening clarity. They weren't just thoughtless, they were manipulative. They were vultures circling, waiting. The humiliation at the wedding wasn't just about aesthetics, it was about power, about keeping me small and unaware while they benefited from my sacrifices, all the while knowing Frank had tried to protect me from this exact scenario. The despair I'd been drowning in was instantly incinerated by a white-hot flame of fury, sharp and clean. Frank's foresight, his quiet act of love from beyond the grave, was a lifeline. He had seen this coming. And he had armed me. Sitting there on the floor, surrounded by the ghosts of the past, I felt a strength I hadn't felt in years. The invisible woman was starting to see a way forward. The initial shock simmered, then solidified into a cold, hard resolve. The hurt hadn't vanished, not entirely, but it was now overlaid with a profound sense of betrayal that demanded action, not tears. Frank's letter and the trust documents weren't just paper, they were a shield and a sword handed to me across time. My first step was clarity. I found the contact information for the trust management firm listed in the documents. The firm was discreet, old school, located in a quiet downtown building. I made an appointment, using my maiden name just to be cautious, though Frank's instructions likely ensured confidentiality. Meeting Mr. Abernathy, a kind, silver-haired gentleman who had known Frank personally, was like stepping into a different world, one governed by fiduciary duty and quiet competence. He remembered Frank fondly. A very prudent man, Mr. Abernathy confirmed, peering at me over his spectacles. And very specific about his intentions for this trust. It was solely for your benefit and protection, Mrs. Peterson. We have guarded it diligently, as per his wishes. He then gently, patiently walked me through the details. The trust had grown significantly over the years, thanks to wise investments and reinvested earnings. The amount was staggering. Far more than I could have ever imagined. Enough to live comfortably, travel, pursue hobbies, even help others, on my own terms. Enough to be completely, utterly independent. He also confirmed Mark's attempts to access information shortly after Frank's death. Yes, we had some correspondence, Mr. Abernathy said delicately. We adhered strictly to the trust charter and your late husband's explicit instructions regarding privacy. Learning the sheer scale of the resources Frank had secured for me, resources Mark knew existed while simultaneously draining my accessible savings, cemented my resolve. This wasn't about revenge, not exactly. It was about reclaiming my life, honoring Frank's intentions, and protecting myself from further exploitation. My next call was to a lawyer specializing in estate and elder law, recommended by Mr. Abernathy. Not the family lawyer Mark and I had used before, someone entirely new, beholden only to me. Ms. Davies was sharp, empathetic, and immediately understood the situation's nuances. We reviewed everything, the trust, my depleted savings, the undocumented loans to Mark, my current will, which, I realized with horror, still named Mark as the primary beneficiary and executor. We need to insulate you, Martha, Ms. Davies stated calmly but firmly. And ensure your assets are protected according to your wishes now. Over the next few weeks, we worked quietly but efficiently. I arranged for regular distributions from the trust to be deposited into a new bank account at a different bank, under my name only. We drafted a new will, one that reflected my current reality. I decided against leaving Mark anything outright, instead setting up a small, conditional fund accessible only for proven medical emergencies, managed by an independent trustee. The bulk of my estate, including the remaining trust assets upon my death, would go to a charity Frank and I had always supported, one focused on helping vulnerable seniors. We updated my powers of attorney, naming Ms. Davies and Mr. Abernathy's firm, not Mark. Every automatic payment, every financial link, however small, that connected me to Mark and Tiffany was severed. I changed my phone number, opting for a simple pay-as-you-go plan, giving the new number only to a handful of trusted friends. It felt like building fortifications, brick by quiet brick, around the life Frank had intended for me, the life I was finally claiming for myself. There were no grand pronouncements, no angry phone calls. Just methodical, decisive action. The invisible woman was quietly building her fortress. The changes were subtle at first, almost imperceptible to the outside world, but profoundly altering my own daily reality. The constant, low-level hum of anxiety about money began to fade, replaced by a quiet hum of possibility. The distributions from the trust weren't extravagant, but they were steady and more than sufficient. I paid off the lingering debt from the wedding contributions, a small act that felt disproportionately satisfying. I stopped checking my old bank account, the one Mark knew about, letting the balance dwindle to nearly nothing. My new account, however, grew steadily. I started small, treating myself to things I'd long deferred, a comfortable new mattress, replacing worn-out appliances, buying fresh flowers for my condo just because I liked them. These weren't luxuries, not really, but affirmations of self-worth I hadn't allowed myself for years. I kept my lifestyle modest, mostly out of habit, but the crushing weight of financial precariousness was gone. And with its absence, my perspective shifted. I began observing Mark and Tiffany not as family I desperately needed acceptance from, but almost as case studies. Without the filter of obligation and hope, their behavior came into sharp focus. The first sign that my quiet withdrawal was noticed came about 2 months after I changed my number and cut off the financial ties. An email landed in my old, rarely checked account. It was from Mark. Subject: checking in. The tone was breezy, faux casual. "Hey Mom, haven't heard from you in ages. Tried calling your old number, guess you changed it? Everything okay? Tiff and I were just thinking about you. Let us know you're alright." No mention of needing anything, but the underlying probe was clear. They'd noticed the silence, likely noticed the cessation of funds they'd perhaps come to expect subtly. I didn't reply immediately. I let the email sit for a week, then sent a brief, polite response: "All fine here, Mark. Just been busy. Hope you and Tiffany are well. Love, Mom." Vague, non-committal, offering no openings. A few weeks later, another email. This one was more direct. "Mom, hey, bit of a situation here. The property tax bill on the apartment is higher than expected this year. Any chance you could help us out, just tide us over? We're a bit stretched after." After what? The lavish wedding? The honeymoon? Their generally unsustainable lifestyle? He didn't specify. It was the familiar script. My old instinct, the ingrained habit of years, urged me to reply, to help, to smooth things over. But the memory of that seat by the kitchen door, the knowledge of the trust fund he knew about, held me firm. I drafted a simple reply, reviewed it with Ms. Davies to ensure it created no implied future obligation, and sent it. "Mark, I'm sorry to hear you're stretched, but my own budget is very tight right now. I'm afraid I'm not in a position to help financially. I hope you can work something out. Love, Mom." It was the first time I had ever said no to him regarding money. Sending it felt like flexing a muscle I hadn't known I possessed. The silence that followed was different. Not the empty silence of my previous isolation, but a charged silence, pregnant with their thwarted expectations. I started noticing subtle changes in their social media presence too. Fewer extravagant dinners posted, less bragging about weekend getaways. Tiffany's post shifted towards finding beauty in simplicity, which I suspected was code for "we're running out of cash." I felt a flicker of something, not quite satisfaction, maybe just validation. The fortress walls were holding. The cracks in their carefully constructed facade began to appear more noticeably over the following months. It wasn't a sudden collapse, but a slow, steady crumble, like mortar weakening in an old wall. Friends who still had some peripheral contact with them relayed snippets of information, often with raised eyebrows. There were rumors of arguments overheard, mentions of Mark seeming stressed, of Tiffany complaining about having to cut back on things she considered essentials, like weekly blowouts and designer coffee. One afternoon, while browsing online, I stumbled upon a local community forum post asking for recommendations for budget-friendly moving companies. The username looked vaguely familiar. Clicking on it, I saw the profile picture, Mark and Tiffany, smiling brightly from one of their wedding photos. They were moving? Out of the trendy city apartment they'd been so proud of, the one I'd helped them secure. A little more digging revealed they were looking for places in a much less glamorous, far cheaper suburb, the kind of area Tiffany used to subtly mock. The property tax bill Mark had mentioned must have been the tip of the iceberg. Without my regular infusions of cash, their lifestyle, built on Mark's modest salary and my dwindling savings, was unsustainable. Then came the incident with the car. A friend mentioned seeing Tiffany driving an older, rather battered-looking sedan, not the sleek, nearly new SUV she always drove. Apparently, the SUV had been leased, and the payments had become unmanageable. The image of Tiffany, who judged my sensible shoes, crammed into a decade-old car was illustrative. It wasn't that I rejoiced in their difficulties. Frank wouldn't have wanted that, and honestly, it just felt sad. Sad that Mark had chosen this path, sad that their relationship seemed built on such shaky, materialistic foundations. But I also felt a growing sense of peace about my decision. My withdrawal wasn't causing their problems, it was simply revealing the problems that were already there, masked by my willingness to fund their illusions. They tried reaching out again, this time with more urgency. Voicemails started appearing on my old landline, which I kept connected for emergencies but rarely answered. Mark's voice, initially casual, grew increasingly strained. "Mom, seriously, where are you? We need to talk." Then, Tiffany left a message, her voice tight with poorly concealed panic. "Martha? It's Tiffany. Look, things are difficult right now. Mark's under a lot of pressure. We really need your support. Could you please call us back? It's important." Support. The word echoed strangely. What they meant was financial support. The emotional support, the respect, the basic human decency, those had never been part of the equation, not really. Especially not on that wedding day. I documented the voicemails, noting the dates and times, just as Ms. Davies had advised. But I didn't call back. The drawbridge to my fortress remained up. Their unraveling was a consequence of their own choices, their own entitlement, their own decision to view me as a resource rather than a mother. Frank's trust wasn't just money, it was clarity. And the clarity it provided showed me that their desperation was a storm of their own making, one I no longer had any obligation to stand in. The confrontation, when it finally came, wasn't the dramatic showdown I might have once envisioned or dreaded. It happened unexpectedly, catching me off guard, yet finding me prepared. I was leaving the library one crisp autumn afternoon, clutching a stack of books, one of the simple pleasures I now regularly allowed myself, when I saw them waiting by my car. Mark and Tiffany. They looked diminished. Mark had lost weight, his face drawn and anxious. Tiffany's usual impeccable grooming was slightly frayed at the edges, her expensive handbag looked worn, and her expression was a mixture of desperation and resentment. My heart gave a jolt of surprise, but the cold resolve I'd cultivated held steady. I didn't try to avoid them. I walked calmly towards my car. "Mark. Tiffany," I greeted them, my voice even. "Mom. We've been trying to reach you for weeks." Mark stepped forward, his voice tight with accusation. "Why haven't you been answering?" "We've been worried sick." Worried about my well-being, or worried about their dwindling access to funds? I knew the answer. "I changed my number some time ago," I said calmly. "I needed some space." "Space?" Tiffany scoffed, stepping forward, her voice sharp. "Space? While your son is drowning? We lost the apartment, Martha. We had to sell the car. We're struggling to make ends meet, and you're needing space?" Her sense of entitlement was breathtaking. Even now, cornering me in a public parking lot, her tone was one of accusation, as if their financial mismanagement was somehow my fault, my responsibility to fix. "I'm sorry to hear you're having difficulties," I replied, keeping my voice level. I unlocked my car door, signaling my intention to leave. But as I told Mark previously, I'm not in a position to help financially. "Not in a position?" Mark almost shouted, his face flushing. "How can you not be? After everything Dad left? We know about the other fund, Mom. The secret one. Ah. There it was. The admission. The confirmation of what the letters had shown me. They knew. They'd always known. The air crackled with tension. Passers-by were starting to glance over. Yes, Mark, I said, turning to face him fully, my voice dropping slightly but laced with steel. I know you know. I found the correspondence. Your letters to the trust firm, demanding access, just weeks after your father died. His face went pale. Tiffany looked momentarily confused, then her eyes narrowed with dawning comprehension, and perhaps fear. Frank was very clear about his intentions for that trust, I continued, my voice steady despite the tremor I felt inside. It was for my security. To protect me. Especially, I added, letting the words hang in the air, from being pressured or guilt-tripped into funding lifestyles that couldn't be sustained honestly. I looked directly at Tiffany. He worried about this exact situation. And he took steps to prevent it. Tiffany opened her mouth, then closed it again, seemingly speechless for once. Mark just stared at me, his earlier anger replaced by a look of stunned disbelief, maybe even shame. All those times you asked for money, I went on, the years of quiet hurt finally finding voice, knowing that safety net was there, untouchable by you? Helping you pay for apartments, cars, this, wedding, I gestured vaguely, the memory of the kitchen doors sharp in my mind, while knowing your father had specifically tried to safeguard my future? That wasn't just thoughtless, Mark. That was cruel. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. The truth, laid bare in the quiet library parking lot, was devastating enough. The funds I have access to now, I stated clearly, are managed according to my wishes and Frank's intentions. And those intentions do not include bailing you out of consequences you created for yourselves. I opened my car door. I suggest you learn to live within your means. Goodbye, Mark. Tiffany. Getting into my car, my hands were shaking, but not from fear. It was adrenaline, release, the catharsis of finally speaking the truth that had festered inside me for so long. I glanced in the rearview mirror as I pulled out of the parking lot. Mark and Tiffany were still standing there, seemingly frozen, looking small and lost against the backdrop of the ordinary suburban street. Their shock was palpable, even from a distance. There was no shouting, no pleading, just the heavy weight of realization settling upon them. The drive back to my condo was quiet. I didn't play the radio. I just focused on the road, breathing deeply, letting the tension slowly drain away. It wasn't triumph I felt, not exactly. It was a profound sense of liberation. The chains of guilt, obligation, and the desperate need for their approval had finally, irrevocably, broken. That evening, I sat in my comfortable armchair, sipping tea, surrounded by the quiet peace of my own space. The confrontation hadn't been pleasant, but it had been necessary. It drew a line in the sand, clear and unambiguous. They knew I knew. They knew the well was dry. They knew I was no longer the invisible, accommodating figure they could manipulate. The power dynamic had shifted, fundamentally and forever. A few days later, a long, rambling email arrived from Mark. It was a confusing mix of apology, justification, and renewed pleading. He was sorry for how things had looked, he hadn't meant it that way, Tiffany was stressed, he was trying his best, couldn't I find it in my heart to forgive, maybe just a small loan to get back on their feet? It lacked any real accountability, any genuine remorse for the years of manipulation or the deep hurt caused by the wedding incident. It was still all about him, about them, about what they needed. I read it once, then deleted it without replying. Forgiveness might come someday, in some form, but trust? Reconciliation? That bridge had been burned, not by me, but by their actions. My peace was hard-won, and I wasn't willing to sacrifice it again on the altar of their entitlement. Ms. Davies had advised establishing clear boundaries, and no contact felt like the healthiest boundary of all right now. My life began to open up in ways I hadn't expected. With the financial anxiety gone and the emotional drain of Mark and Tiffany's demands removed, I had energy. I started volunteering at the local animal shelter, something I'd always wanted to do. I joined a book club at the library where the confrontation had inadvertently occurred. I reconnected with old friends, the genuine ones who liked me for me, not for what I could provide. I even started planning a small trip, a cruise to Alaska, something Frank and I had talked about but never managed. Using his carefully preserved gift to finally see the glaciers felt like honoring him in the truest way. I was living, not just existing. The woman hidden by the pillar was stepping into the sunlight. Looking back now, from the quiet comfort of my own life, a life built on resilience and the unexpected gift of foresight from my late husband, the path seems clearer. The pain of that wedding day, the sting of being told I was ruining the aesthetic, was excruciating. It felt like the culmination of years of being diminished, taken for granted, slowly erased. It pushed me into a darkness, a feeling of worthlessness that seemed insurmountable at the time. But sometimes, it takes hitting rock bottom, feeling utterly invisible, to find the strength to look up and see a different way. Finding Frank's letter and the truth about the trust fund wasn't just about discovering money, it was about discovering my own value, independent of my role as a mother or a provider. It was validation that my well-being mattered, that Frank had seen my worth and taken steps to protect it. That knowledge became my anchor, allowing me to weather the emotional storm and make decisions based on self-preservation and respect, not guilt or obligation. Cutting ties with Mark and Tiffany wasn't an act of vengeance, though I admit there was a certain grim satisfaction in watching their entitled world crumble under the weight of its own unsustainability. It was, fundamentally, an act of self-love. It was choosing peace over perpetual turmoil, choosing dignity over constant disrespect. It was honoring Frank's wish for me to have security and peace of mind. Do I miss the son I thought I had? Sometimes. I mourn the relationship that could have been, the closeness I once cherished. But I don't miss the constant anxiety, the feeling of being used, the slow erosion of my own resources and self-esteem. The Mark who stood in that parking lot, demanding access to funds his father had deliberately kept from him, wasn't the son I remembered raising. Or perhaps, he was, and I had simply refused to see it clearly through the blinding lens of maternal love. My life now is smaller in some ways, no grand family gatherings, no daughter-in-law to impress, but infinitely richer. It's filled with genuine connections, quiet joys, and the freedom to be unapologetically myself, sensible shoes and all. I travel modestly, volunteer my time, read voraciously, and sleep soundly, knowing I am secure and beholden to no one but myself. The aesthetic I cultivate now is one of peace, resilience, and quiet contentment. It suits me far better than any designer gown ever could. Thanks for listening to my story. It wasn't easy to share, but talking about these things, bringing them into the light, feels important. If you've made it this far, please consider subscribing if you haven't already. Your support means a lot. And please, share your own experiences or thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice to protect your own peace? Have you ever discovered strength you didn't know you possessed after a painful experience? Your voice matters. Sharing our stories helps us realize we aren't alone in our struggles or our triumphs. Thank you again for being here. Take care.